Now, one possibility of a potential worldwide news story that I didn't anticipate becoming this huge talking point was Tiger Woods and a feminine hygiene product. Tiger Woods and a tampon took over not just the sports news cycle this weekend, but the mainstream news cycle. The woke mob and pearl clutchers were out in full force all weekend at the news that during the opening round of the Genesis Open at Riviera, Tiger Woods slipped a tampon into the hands of Justin Thomas after outdriving him on one of the holes. Now, when I got into sports media several years ago and then got the privilege of having my own radio show on golf about a year ago, at no point did I ever think I would need to discuss tampons on my show, but here we are in 2023. So here's the deal. Did I think it was funny that Tiger Woods slipped a tampon in the hands of Justin Thomas? The answer is no. It wasn't funny in the slightest. It was sophomoric, immature, in poor taste, cheesy, and just all around lame. It was all of those things 100%. It was lame. However, the one thing it wasn't was offensive. If you're part of the social media mob that was offended by this action, you're part of the problem with society as a whole today. What that was a bad joke in poor taste made between two guys who are very close friends and have been for many years. If you're offended by this, have you asked yourself, has there ever been a time that you and one of your close friends have been out at a restaurant or in public or any public setting and cracked a quiet joke amongst each other at someone else walking by or at another table? If you answered no, that you and your friend would never do such a thing, then it's time you start to question why you don't have any closer friends in your life. Because this is what people do. This tiny, silly action ended up being blown up on social media with a bunch of people who haven't watched more than 30 seconds of the PGA Tour in the past decade, and it allowed them an opportunity to project the misery of their own life upon Tiger Woods and the rest of the world. I have a friend that works in radio and TV here in Canada and is a fairly well-known personality. I won't name her because she's an old friend, but her take on Twitter on this subject was so ridiculous. I won't put her on blast, but I know for a fact this woman knows absolutely nothing about Tiger, and I can also guarantee she hasn't watched 8 seconds of golf at any point in the past decade. But now she's chiming in on how disgusting this was for Tiger, quote, as a girl dad, and that he must do better in life because this was so appalling to her. Now, if you pay no attention to a sport or anything else in life, you don't all of a sudden get to chime in on that subject and give your opinion. This has become a major societal problem. Whatever happened to minding your own business? Is that even possible anymore? Well, apparently not. So I don't watch curling or Broadway musicals, which then should exclude me from discussing the nuances or controversies surrounding curling or Broadway musicals. It's none of my business, and so it shouldn't be yours. I saw an article by Emily Tannenbaum from Glamour magazine who wrote, quote, personally, I wonder if Tiger Woods knows we're dealing with a national tampon shortage. Has he ever heard the term period poverty? According to a 2019 study by Always, 1 in 5 girls in the U.S. has missed school due to the lack of period products. Well, okay, it's Glamour magazine, so maybe Emily Tannenbaum gets a pass for her ridiculous projection on Tiger. But then we have Farrell Evans from Sports Illustrated wrote, quote, a tampon is a very useful, low-cost, and portable prop to exploit many stereotypes about women. Would seem to give Thomas the tampon because his driving performance was reminiscent of the weaker sex. In his mind, he is more of a man than his 29-year-old protege from Kentucky because he was the longer hitter. Playful or not, this is the kind of mindset that once limited women's rights to participate in certain roles in the military and in organized sports, unquote. That's Sports Illustrated writing that. So here's the deal. This outrage over every little thing in society needs to stop, and there needs to be a major pushback, starting now. Because where does it end? At what point does this insane ideology end? Like, I stood by idly in the late 90s and early 2000s when political correctness entered the picture, and most of it was reasonable at the time. Old jokes that were acceptable in the 1980s and 90s needed to be checked and altered because society was changing. And of course, we can't just go back to allowing every racist and sexist joke under the sun to be okay and allowed in any public forum. Like, we needed to make some changes in sports and society as a whole. That was a given. But then it was pushed back further and further. And now we're at a point in society where two golf superstars can't even crack a joke inside the ropes of their insanely intense job. I mean, being a professional golfer is literally one of the more challenging jobs in the world. Want to be one? Okay, start trying tomorrow. Let me know how that goes for you. So when you have a stressful job, you're allowed to crack a few jokes somewhere in the mix, just to maybe try and lighten the mood. But I've reached this point in my life where I'm now sick of the woke mob and the pearl clutchers freaking out at every little thing that triggers them and offends them. Well, more often than not, it doesn't really offend them, but it's just an opportunity to propel themselves on social media and get clicks. And it's also an opportunity for them to take down someone else in society who has more than them. Tiger Woods is a billionaire athlete, so let's chip away at everything he is and stands for. That's their mindset. Again, I thought the joke was lame and crass, but it's also none of my business. Just like the jokes I crack with my friends of 20 or 30 years are none of yours. We say and do things amongst each other that I would never do or say with someone at work or in a social setting with people, just acquaintances. Do this with my best friends, and so do you. Don't say you don't. Tiger tried to do this subtly, like hand JT the tampon, but someone took a picture of it and it just blew up. And I'm just so over the woke mob coming for everyone and everything. I mean, part of me wishes Tiger had a bit more guts and just came out and said, "Get a life. It was a joke. Okay, maybe you didn't think it was funny, but it was a joke. Get over it and get over yourself." But instead, he was pressured into giving a half-assed apology. It sounded like this.
Yeah, it was supposed to be, all fun and games, but obviously it hasn't turned out that way. And if I had offended anybody, it was not the case. It was just friends having fun. And as I said, if I offended anybody in any way, shape, or form, I'm sorry. It was not intended to be that way. It's just, we play pranks on one another all the time, and virally, I think this did not come across that way. But between us, it's different.
And in true 2023 fashion, the same people offended by that tampon joke were also offended by his apology. And that's why we as a society need to stop catering to these maniacs who are so easily offended. We as a society as a whole need to push back against this ideology, because if we allow them to continue to push the line backwards and backwards, eventually we'll all be pressed against the wall and unable to crack a joke of any kind and allow any sort of moments with our close friends or families. Another thing the social media mob chiming in doesn't realize is who Tiger Woods actually is. I mean, this is a guy that didn't have the upbringing of you and I. He was a child star and a prodigy, and pushed into the public eye since a very young age. Now, I'm not making excuses for Tiger because he's done some pretty crappy things in his life, but this tampon thing certainly isn't one of them. This is just the social media mob looking for something to be outraged about today. And then they'll be on to something and someone else tomorrow to be outraged about. I guarantee it. Give it 3 days, this Tiger thing will be forgotten. They'll be on to something else. But back to Tiger's upbringing. When you have the childhood and life he's had, he's missed out on learning how to interact with most people. And he was always surrounded by yes men who laughed at every joke, no matter how crass or off color it was, because he was Tiger Woods. So this is a guy that never really properly learned what socially is acceptable and what isn't acceptable, because he lives in a completely different universe than the rest of us. And these are, the woke mob doesn't understand this. Now, I had Armin Katayan on my show last year, who was the author of the definitive book on Tiger Woods. It's called Tiger. Go check it out. I've read it twice. And I asked him about Tiger's upbringing, and here's what Armin, the author of the Tiger Woods book, had to say on that subject.
I'm of the thought that there's more parallels with Tiger with Michael Jackson than there is with Michael Jordan. I mean, Michael Jackson and Tiger never really had a childhood. You think maybe that's a fair assessment?
That's an absolutely fair assessment. And I think it's a very wise look at something, because Michael's upbringing, Jordan's upbringing was, I don't think anywhere near as complicated as Tiger's, where Michael Jackson was certainly with his father, was under the same kind of microscope and pressures that Tiger Woods found himself in. And, you can look at other child stars. Tiger was on the Mike Douglas show, a variety show in the afternoon in the States, very popular show in the 70s and late 70s and the early 80s. He was on that show at 2.5 years old. So he's been in the spotlight really almost from the time he could talk. And I don't even know how to kind of come to grips with something like that. And one of the things that Jeff and I really worked hard on in the book was not to be judgmental, to just let the facts, as best as we could report them, speak for themselves. and let the reader come to their own conclusions as the book evolves.
Well, the moral to the story is if this offends you, you are the problem, not Tiger. Get a grip on your own life, and unless something affects you directly or personally, mind your own business and stay the hell out of ours. It's time we cancel culture, because this has gone too far and it's got to stop. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Mr. McKee and subscribe to This Week in Golf on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, wherever it is you prefer to listen to your podcast. I'm Chris McKee, and you're listening to This Week in Golf on Saga 960.